First thing that we're going to need for this exercise is some data. We need to have some information that we can loop through and create a list from. So let's start by setting that up. And we're going to set that up within JavaScript. And we're not going to use a JavaScript object. We're going to use JSON within JavaScript. So let's set up our variable data. And this is where we're going to hold our data and all of our information that we're going to be contained within our list. So let's start by creating an object, and we'll console log out that data so that we can see it better within our application. So let's go and open up our console, and we see right now completely blank, empty information. So now next item up is we need to add in some tasks. So let's create our first object here, and we'll give it a name of tasks. And remember, it's paired values, so we're going to have tasks, and within the tasks, we can have a bunch of objects within there as well. So tasks is going to relate into an object, and I also am going to show you a better way to do this later on. But for now, we're just starting out with just a simple way to list out a bunch of things that we might want to do, and we need to be able to track if they're done or not. So that's going to be a Boolean value. So let's give these tasks some names. So we might have to cut grass, and we're going to equal that to false. So that's not done. And use the colon to separate that out. So let's refresh again. So we've got our tasks there. First task, cut grass, false. And now we can enter in a bunch of other ones as well. So we can comma separate out these tasks. Let me clean this up so we can see it a little bit better. And while it's as a JavaScript object, so it's not a string, if it was a string, things are going to get a little bit trickier. And we are going to turn this into a string so that we have something that we can turn back into a JavaScript object, and basically so we can practice working with JSON. But for now, we can do it within this type of format. So the next thing that you might need to do within your list is you might need to clean room. And we'll also put this one as false. So notice that there is a difference between JSON and JavaScript objects, because with the JavaScript objects, we don't need the quotes, but we also can't use spaces because that's just not going to work. So this is one of the differences between JSON and a JavaScript object, is that with JSON, we're quoting around it. So the named values, the names, are actually going to allow us to have a space in there. And they're not properly formatted. So typically we do the camel case. So we do like something like cut grass. So in this case, we're just doing it as we normally would write cut grass. So we're uppercasing the first two. So let's add in something else that we might want to do. So go to gym. So that's another thing that we might want to do. And maybe this one, we've already accomplished that. So we'll put true. And let's add one more, make dinner. And this one also is something that we haven't accomplished just. So that gives us a good sampling of some tasks that we can use. And so there we go. So we've got a bunch of tasks there. So the question is this JSON? So is this a JSON object? So let's go and grab this, bring it into JSON lint, and this allows us to validate and really check to see if something is a valid JSON format. And we hit validate, and yes, it comes back as a valid JSON object. So what if we've got the data and it's not a valid, it is a valid JSON object, but we've got no spaces in it. So essentially it's a string value. So let me show you how we're going to convert this into a string. I can go into here. I'm going to use browserling.com. So basically this is a website that's got a tool that removes out the white spaces. So essentially lets me really easily convert this into a string. So let's try this now. So going into here, and we know with strings in JavaScript, we need to quote around those. So I'll paste that string in and end the quote. Save that. So what do you think is going to happen here when we try to look at that object? So we see that it's still being output here, but it's within a whole string format. So we're not able to get data, tasks, cut grass. So that's not going to make any sense anymore. And we also know that whenever we did this, we removed out our white space. So let's add our white space back in between the names here. So there we go. So we still are pulling in that information. So what I want you to do now it's your turn. So go ahead and create a list and then remove out that white space, turn it into a string, just using white space remover, or you could just simply delete out all of the white space. So at this point, you should have a list of tasks, and we've got a bunch of tasks. So some of them can be false, some of them can be true. You can make up your own tasks, have some fun with it, build out your own JSON object. Make sure that you go over and validate it as JSON formatted, because it is essential that the format is a JSON format. And usually I like to do this just as I did within this exercise, where I grab this and then I remove out the white space to turn it into a string, because we know that if we have a string, we can't have spaces like that. So like if we have a string like this, it's just not going to work. So we got to make sure that we're formatting it properly into a string value, and whenever we quote around it, we can't simply grab that JSON object anymore and paste it in here. So I'll just show you, double check that it doesn't work this way. Where it was okay when it was a JavaScript object format, but it wasn't when we turned it into a string. And we do want to have a string because we do want to practice pulling JSON information out of a string and then making it useful. So that's going to simulate getting information within various formats that you have to work with when you bring this content into your web application. So go ahead, try this out for yourself. And the next lesson, we're going to be parsing this into a usable object and then going through it and outputting some content within our HTML. So all of that is still coming up.